Well, I am honored to be on this stage with these two absolutely remarkable women. And the people who are displaced are top of mind for both of you in your line of work. So I think I want to start with, when we speak of displaced people, what do these people look like? Who are they?
Well, I often think when we speak about displaced people, and thank you so much for being here to talking about this, because it's not a very pleasant subject. We talk about numbers, and we talk about a group of people that are just called displaced or irregular migration. But don't forget that when we talk about displaced people, 80% are women and children, 50% are children. So if you see a face of a displaced person, it will often be a woman or a child. So I think we always have to remember that these are people we are talking about and not just numbers.
We talked about refugees as economic assets and not just being numbers.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
I think, first of all, we need to transform the narrative in which refugees and displaced people have always been portrayed as, and that is destitution. Yes, there's the physical destitution, but these are people who had careers, who had families, who had lives before they were displaced because of war, because of conflict, because of climate change. So what happens is the media then changes that narrative and portrays people as though they are liabilities. How are we going to house them? Where are we going to put them in our communities? Not forgetting or negating the fact that these are skilled individuals that can be infiltrated within communities. Therefore, we change the narrative to say they are not economic liabilities, but they are economic assets, if only we find durable solutions to be able to empower them in their new world.
So you touched on the role of the media, and Her Excellency and I were discussing this. What is the role of the media when it comes to portraying refugees and also representing the interests of refugees? Does the media have a role?
I think the media definitely has a role. I mean, we're using media today. So what is the narrative that we're pushing today? We're speaking about humanity and how to forge forward in terms of the new world that we now find ourselves in. Why then do we have conversations that only involve people who are still safe, people who still have their reality that hasn't been altered by anything else? Why can't we include people who have been displaced? So we have to be able to find different solutions and different ways of telling the story. You know, what I love is that there's so many documentaries, there's so many films. In fact, now we're not living in a bubble anymore. I think that bubble that we used to live in as humankind has definitely burst, and we find ourselves in a new renaissance.
No, I totally agree with that. I think the most important when we talk about refugees, and I come from a country where we also have been strict on immigration, and I think there's many reasons why you have to protect your borders. So I'm never talking about not protecting your borders in any country, but I do think that it will help our narrative, and I think what you're doing also is to, both in terms of stories and narrative, to tell these stories, to understand and remember that we are talking about real people. And I do think, I live half my time in the UK, and I think the way we've been talking about people coming over in small boats from France right now has really diminished people to just being numbers and not being real people that has real rights. And obviously one of the things I'm most concerned about is to talk about children's rights, because children are refugees too, and they have very specific rights. And I hope that in all this debate and all this noise around refugees, that we never forget that children are really a special kind of refugee that should demand and should be given certain very specific rights.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. I think one of the most fantastic things that I've also experienced before is seeing how different institutions and colleges around the world partner with refugee camps or schools in refugee camps. So high schools, elementary schools, or even young people who have actually left school and are now looking for college opportunities, but because of immigration laws, they're unable to obviously be integrated into another country. So what happens is, universities from around the world find schools in refugee camps and offer programs that are specifically designed for them. So there's always different and creative ways to find how we can be able to link those borders across from each other. And again, it's not 1 in 20 million refugees, it's 1 refugee 20 million times. And if you can be able to see that, you see the person and not the number.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, go ahead. This is wonderful.
No, I really think this about, if ever you have met a refugee or someone who's grown up and used to be a refugee, I'm always struck by the extreme resilience and the hope that always comes in doing more. And I often think of children who have been refugees and have stolen their childhood 3 times.
Right.
First when they were in their community, then when they were on the move, and then often in their host setting as well, their host country, where it's very, very difficult for them to enter. And I do think we have to respect that the resilience you get from having your childhood stolen 3 times can be an enormous asset for your community if you are welcomed properly.
So we talk about the resilience of refugees, but naturally that resilience also has a downside, a dark side, which is PTSD, anxiety. So how can governments in particular provide psychosocial support to refugees, particularly if there's this, this narrative around displaced populations and refugees as being a nuisance?
We live in a time where a lot of politicians are under pressure to find fast solutions to these issues. And often when they do that, they forget that we are all bound by international human rights, the rights of the child, rights of refugees. And my hope, and what I think we should be saying to all our politicians, is really try to abide by the international rules in this, because that will guide you to which rights these people have who are on the move. And if we are talking about 100 million people who are on the move, this is a big population, and I think there's something in what you're saying. Why don't we start thinking about these people as someone who could also contribute economically?
Absolutely. And in terms of investment, I mean, if you go to a refugee camp, it's also very hard to explain what the landscape of a refugee camp is. But if you go to a refugee camp, there is an economy there. Multi-million-dollar economy. We have systems like M-Pesa, which is out of Kenya, which is about sending each other money, using your cell phone. That is within the refugee system as well. So there's so much that when we speak about investment, never not think about refugee camps as a form of investment as well. How best to, because we don't want, here's the thing, there's this narrative that refugees are destitute and are unable to provide for themselves, but they can. The ingenuity that's there, the investment opportunities that are there, skill sets that are there. It's such an untapped market. In fact, today, there's a refugee team at the Olympics.
Yeah.
At the Olympics. So I know for sure also, one of the things that I participated in was a TED Talk. The first ever TED Talk to take place in a refugee camp was in Kakuma in Kenya. And I had the honor of speaking on that stage. So if a TED Talk, an organization that big, can be able to set up in a refugee camp and be able to be an equal global player, what is stopping Priority FII from doing so?
Yeah.
Hi, Richard.
So this room is filled with extremely influential people, which FII does a good job of curating and bringing together. So I'd like to know from each of you, what is one urgent action that should be taken from people in this room?
I would like to not say an action that should be taken, but I'm going to challenge. If you were able to make the 4th Industrial Revolution work in a normal society, in a normal town, in a normal city, I challenge you to take it to a refugee camp. That's my challenge. No pressure.
I love that challenge. We see so often that when refugees land in a host country, they are mentally challenged. They don't know how they should come to belong. They are fearful. They really struggle to be part of the community that they enter. And if we want to release this potential of people being also an economic asset to their host country, I urge everyone in this room who has the power to hire anyone, go out, find the refugees in your community and hire them. Because if they can stand up and make their own living and make it into their community in terms of a job, everything could be different, not only for them and for you and your community, but also to the refugees that will come after them. So go out, find them, hire them. I think that's the biggest thing you can do for a person, give them a job.
I think it's also, as the media, I think we have the power to showcase these stories of resilience and to inspire and to find these inspirational stories. So I guess my request
You can have one.
Exactly, I'm going to answer my own question.
You're already doing
my
it.
request is to bring us those stories, the stories of these resilient refugees who are change makers after overcoming the craziest of odds in a lot of times. So, well, this has been an absolutely wonderful conversation, and clearly we all have work to do. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.